Hey there, and welcome to the Designated Pundits, Major League Soccer on I-80 Sports. Today, as part of our 2024 MLS season preview, we're talking about the New England Revolution. We are here with the one, the only Greg Johnstone from Revolution Recap, joining us again this season. It's been a long off season. Greg, how you doing?
Good. It's been long, but I don't think it's been long enough. I think for a lot of Revs fans, they're still kind of licking their wounds from last season, and it seems like the season's kind of approached us very quickly. So excited for soccer-ish. You know, we're starting the Champions League next a couple of weeks here, so I guess that's something to look forward to. But it's been a long and dreary off season for Revs fans.
Absolutely has, and I love the Boston Red Sox, Cap. I am a displaced Atlanta Braves fan, so my teams growing up have always been the Braves and whoever's playing the Yankees. So plenty of love right there. Let's get into the 2023 season. Briefly recap what happened last year before we move into our predictions for the New England Revolution. And it was one heck of a season. A lot of ups and downs for sure. Let's talk about some of them. You had a 15-10-9 record, finished 5th in the Eastern Conference. 58 goals scored, was 3rd in the East, pretty prolific offense, but 46 goals against led to only a plus 12 goal differential. You guys lost to Philly in the first round of the playoffs after playing Philadelphia on decision day and 2 games of the first round of the playoffs. So the last 3 games of the season against rival Philadelphia there. Let's talk about the season in retrospective, shall we?
Yeah, and I don't know how much time we have. I'm going to do my best to keep it short, but there was really kind of a tale of 2 seasons where the Revs, coming off of a disappointing 2022 season, tried to regain their form, winning the Supporters' Shield in 2021. They were trying to get back to that. They were around the 2nd seed. They were chasing Cincinnati for most of the season and looked like to be one of the contenders coming out of the East. Then Leagues Cup hit. Then chaos hit. Bruce Arena put on administrative leave. He eventually ends up resigning. It comes out in The Athletic that some of the people that filed a complaint against Bruce Arena, one of them was Richie Williams, who was then the interim manager. So Richie Williams was put on leave, and Clint Piet, who was the Revs 2 head coach, takes over. And then just complete disaster down the stretch. 3 wins, 3 draws, 4 losses in the final 10 games after Leagues Cup for the Revolution. That was a pretty poor schedule. Truth be told, with all respect to those teams, Colorado, Minnesota, Austin, those were games that they should have been taking 3 points and they were getting 0 or 1s. So very disappointing stretch in the post Bruce Arena world. The other thing too is that Georgi Petrovic left around the same time. Brandon Bai tears his ACL in Leagues Cup as well. So a lot of things going against the Revs down the stretch. So going into this year, has things turned around? Are the Revs going to revert back to their early 2023 form? Or is there going to be a hangover effect from that final 10 games and their very poor performance in the playoffs against the Philadelphia Union, who's becoming quite the rival for the Revs?
Well, you better not be asking me, because that's why we brought you on the show, Greg. You did sign new coach Caleb Porter this winter to be the new manager. And, you know, this is kind of a strange move to me. It's kind of a win now move, but with a coach who has a losing career record. Very interesting. What do you think about Caleb Porter?
Well, when you put it that way, it sounds bad. But, you know, I think with Caleb Porter, I think he was the right guy to go out and get. The other names that were mentioned, I think Gio Savarese would have been a good hire. But Bob Bradley, I wasn't a huge fan of. And considering how much locker room turmoil there was in TFC last season, I don't know if throwing him into our locker room chaos would necessarily be the right fit. I think the team right now needs a strong voice. And I think a guy like Caleb Porter, who's won at Akron, in Portland, in Columbus, he certainly has the resume. Bottom line, he has the resume, and I think it's good they've gone out and hired someone who has a proven track record of winning, but he's also got a strong voice that I think is needed right now. I think the Revolution need a leader in the head coach position. So I wouldn't say it's an upgrade over Bruce Arena. And truth be told, Caleb Porter is inheriting most of this roster. I think they kept 26 or 27 players from last year. Kurt Anolfo was elevated from technical director to sporting director. A lot of pieces that Bruce Arena had in place are still in place. So Caleb Porter is kind of coming in and mostly inheriting the situation, hasn't put his fingerprints all over this. So it's a bit of an odd situation for him. But I think of the candidates that were tied to the Revolution job, I think Caleb Porter was the best choice available.
I like that. I like what you're saying there, because it feels like, even though we talked about Caleb Porter feels like a win now guy, it feels like a stabilized now project. Like, you just went through like real trauma as an organization. Caleb Porter is a coach with the right sort of track record of dealing with the right sort of players and names, and getting something out of them. Maybe he's not the most mercurially talented, win prolific head coach, but he is a guy who can get you guys pointed in the right direction at the very least, and probably win some games along the way too. So I like that. I like what you're saying there. And I hope that the other Rev fans have a similar sort of outlook on him.
Well, the other thing too, I'll add one more thing though, because I think the knock on Caleb Porter is, I believe he's got 2 MLS Cups, but I believe he's made the playoffs, I think 4 or 5 out of his 9 seasons in MLS. So people point out that, it's boom or bust with Caleb Porter. I think with the Revs too, you look at this team, this is kind of a boom or bust season. Carlos Gil is in a contract year. They've lost Georgi Petrovic, but there's a lot of pieces that have been around a long time. And, I don't want to say their window is closing, because I feel like I've said that 2 or 3 years in a row, and I come back the next year and I say they're still there. But, I think this is a team that's primed to win now. And so I think if they had gone out and gotten an assistant coach that, or promoted someone from USL or MLS Next Pro, or I think there would have been some on the job learning and a bit of a learning curve. So I think going out and getting a boom or bust guy like Caleb Porter, I think that's a risk worth taking.
Absolutely, I agree there. Let's take a look at the contributors from last season and how this offense broke down. Carlos Gil, 11 goals, 8 assists. Gustavo Bo, 8 goals, 4 assists. You had Bobby Wood, 7 goals and 5 assists. Giacomo Vrioni, 6 goals, 2 assists. Thomas Chankale, 6 goals. Emmanuel Boateng, 2 goals, 2 assists. And Dejuan Jones with 1 goal and 5 assists. Let's take a look at this contributors chart. Tell us what happened on offense last year.
Well, on offense last year, you can look at Bobby Wood's production. Most of that came in the first half of that season. Vrioni, 6 goals. You might not think that's horrible, but for a designated player, I think those numbers are lacking a little bit. And I'm also going to drop kind of one of my favorite stats. Vrioni has been with the Revolution for a year and a half. Quick quiz, you guys. How many goals do you think he's scored on the road so far in a year and a half?
Since you're pulling the stat up, I'm guessing 0.
Yeah, 1 or less.
0. He hasn't scored on the road yet. He's been here a year and a half, and he's a designated player. So there's going to be a lot of question on whether or not they can unlock Giacomo Vrioni this season. And that's going to be, I think, Caleb Porter's biggest test, because a lot is riding on Vrioni. Because once Bobby Wood kind of regressed after his hot start in the season, and Vrioni started getting starts, he was a massive disappointment down the stretch. And I'll also say Gustavo Bo there listed with 8 goals and 4 assists. I believe that was about 1,300 minutes last year. He was a very productive player, but he's left the team. His contract ran out and it was not renewed. He was hampered by injuries the last 2 seasons, but was productive while he still got on the field. So with 3 designated players, with the acquisition of Thomas Chankale, there was really no room for Gustavo Bo to stay on this team, which is very unfortunate. 50 goals in a Revolution kit for him over his, I think, 4.5 seasons. Super productive player, really always came through. And now that he's gone, the Revs might be missing a safety net. So big year for Giacomo Vrioni in 2024.
I agree, but when I look at Vrioni, and the thing I'm going to kind of push back a little bit here, he's played like 1,500 minutes over the course of a season and a half. So, yeah, 7 goals over a season and a half isn't a lot, but if you put his numbers up and the fact that he could play 3,000 minutes, if he scored 14 goals this season, that's on pace with what he's done, and I think that would shut up some critics.
Well, and some people, too, also think that, he comes in and, he doesn't get a string of games, or a lot of people think he should be playing in a 2-striker formation. So maybe Chankale and Vrioni will be playing up top this year. So there are a lot of people that look at the numbers, like you said, and I'll also add to it, he scored a hat-trick in Leagues Cup last year. But there's just too many games where he's ineffective and he kind of vanishes. So the numbers look good, but those goals kind of come in bunches. They come at home. They come when they're playing on the front foot. Whereas on the road, against more difficult opponents, he's yet to find his footing. So it's going to be very interesting to see if he progresses in 2024.
A lot last year we saw like a 4-3-3 formation. When you talk about coaching, formation, tactics, I know you kind of guys are going to be in a little bit of a new system, but can you talk about what we would expect to see if we turned on a game?
Yeah, well, you could be seeing some sort of two-striker formation because I think Shankly, they've kind of tested him up top in preseason as a striker. But for the most part, I would expect to see a 4-2-3-1 formation similar to what we saw under Bruce Arena. Shankly kind of came in and replaced Dylan Barrero after he went out due to injury. And people are very excited for Dylan Barrero to return mid-season. So I think towards the end of the season, the hopes of a Shankly Barrero wing combination with Carlos Little gets people very excited. So I would imagine that you're going to see a 4-2-3-1 because those three players will all be playing at their strengths if you play them as wingers and with Carlos Hill in the middle.
Now, Chancalay and Barrero might be a good wing formation, but earlier this week we were hearing the possibility of a Chancalay Alberth Elise winger pair, which would make me a little more excited. However, looks like that was not to be. Let's take a look at the incoming and outgoing players. Incoming, you have Henrik Rivas, Nick Lima, and Jonathan Mensah. So you have, a new, shiny new goalie. You have Nick Lima, who's kind of a proven MLS veteran. We kind of know what he brings to the table. He's good in a pinch on a wing. Doesn't defend enough for my liking. And then you got Jonathan Mensah, who's going to be, center back depth. Not too much there. Talk about the incoming players.
Yeah, Mensah essentially is going to be replacing Omar Gonzalez as a depth center back. Center back is an area that I think they've had some issues with Henry Kessler the past 2 seasons. Kessler has missed some time due to injury. Andrew Farrell has filled in for him, but last year there was a situation where Kessler was out, Brandon Bai was out due to an ACL tear, and so Andrew Farrell is also kind of the backup right back as well. So there was just kind of a lack of depth along the line. So Nick Lima is being brought in essentially to replace Brandon Bai at the start of the season. Mensah is going to be a depth center back, and then Andrew Farrell is kind of, I guess, back up both Kessler / Romney at center back, along with Mensah, and then also playing as a backup right back behind Nick Lima. I think Henrik Rabas is the most interesting name here. He's going to be replacing Georgi Petrovic, which is no small task. We've been spoiled in New England with our goalkeepers between Matt Turner and Georgi Petrovic. And Rabas is a guy that has Premier League ambitions. He talks about going to the Premier League. He was previously signed with Derby County for a number of years and kind of went on loan with them, never found his footing. He bounced around between Slovakia and Poland. He recently got his team promoted to the Polish First Division. And then I believe it was about a $1.2 million transfer fee that the Revs used on him. I'm personally not too thrilled with his resume. He's 26 years old. It's not like he's a young up-and-coming keeper like Georgi Petrovic was. He was 21 when the Revs found him. So the age is a little bit concerning. But if you watch his highlight reel, he's got great reflexes, and those are kind of the goalkeepers that Kevin Hitchcock, the Revolution goalkeeper coach, really likes. So it seems like this is a guy that's a better fit for the Revolution. Maybe not as high ceiling as a Georgi Petrovic or even a Matt Turner, but certainly seems to be someone that kind of fits their mold and is certainly an improvement, with all due respect to Earl Edwards Jr. and Jacob Jackson, an improvement over the 2 guys that were rotating in and out towards the end of the season last year. So he's the key guy to look at and the biggest improvement for the Revolution this offseason.
As far as outgoing players, we already mentioned the goalie, Petrovic, from last year. You also have Gustavo Bo, who left. That's a huge hole that's going to be left in this offense. But, you gotta part ways, I guess, sometimes. Omar Gonzalez, Christian McCoon, Ben Sweat, those are just kind of depth pieces for me. Revolutions are really similar to what Philadelphia did. We talked with Philadelphia last night, and it just seemed like good enough, run it back. Yeah. Is there a chance that you guys bring someone else in? Is there another surprise signing here, or is it just going to be let's get healthy and finish, and make the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, they do have one more senior roster spot, and as you mentioned, they were going after Elise, which did not seem to work out, and it seemed like they were going to spend a lot of money on him.
That seems ambitious. That does seem ambitious to me.
Yeah, and I think part of that, too, is you have Barrero missing at the beginning of the season, but there also needs to be some more firepower, in my opinion. I think the Revs are going to look at Brioni and Bobby Wood, and if they're not getting the job done early, I would certainly expect to see a forward come in during the summer transfer window. So the other thing, too, is that roster space-wise, there isn't a lot of movement. There's one senior roster spot left, but it's expected that there is some GAM or some money within the cap that the Revs can play with. I mean, obviously, we're talking about them acquiring a TAM player, so they certainly have some room to play with in terms of numbers below the cap. So, if the firepower isn't there, I think the team is certainly going to go out and make a big upgrade in the summer. Right now, though, it seems like this is the team they're rolling with to start the 2024 season.
Does it feel like the first half of the season here is a time for Caleb Porter to get settled, to get to know his players, to see what that can be, and then maybe try and pull a Columbus and address something and really have like a big impact in the summer?
Yeah, well, that's one way you can look at it. I think the beginning of the year is going to be very crucial for Caleb Porter and the Revolution because, and we talk about locker room turmoil. A lot of weird things happened with the Revolution, and I think the team and the organization is really set on. They kept so many pieces. This would have been an offseason that I think a lot of people thought you'd clear house. You get rid of the problems and just kind of start over. And the Revs really doubled down on their roster and also some of their coaches. Clint Bier, who was the Revs 2 coach that took over on an interim basis, he's now an assistant coach with the Revolution. And to my understanding, he never had a relationship with Caleb Porter before that. Richie Williams, who was placed on leave as an assistant coach, the team has brought him back as Revolution 2 coach, which is a very strange and awkward move that, if you can't have him go back to his job with the senior team with Revs 1, why would you keep him as a Revs 2 coach? So I think there's a potential for if you start the season struggling a little bit, it might still feel like an extension of last year. So I think that Caleb Porter has a lot of pressure to get off on the right foot. And we are in Champions League too. I will say, we were, or Champions Cup. We played Pumas 2 years ago. We had a 3-0 lead going into leg 2. Team blew it. They ended up being knocked out in leg 2 in penalty kicks. And that really started the downward spiral for the Revolution. So I think it's totally possible that if they crash out of the Champions Cup and if they start out, struggling, not getting their feet under them, dropping points at home, dropping points to teams that on paper are weaker to them, I think this team might have a prolonged struggle more so than they should.
I pulled up a little depth chart here. Now, this is not, from someone in the know. This is just something we scribbled out to talk about on today's episode. Before we talk about the actual players and the positions, can we talk about the tactics, what we expect to see moving when and where? Now, this is kind of a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3, depending on how you look at the position. But let's talk about, kind of the responsibilities and how we're going to see these players interacting.
Yeah, so Brandon Bye and DeJuan Jones, they're both wingbacks that are going to get up the pitch. They're both very dangerous players on the offensive side of the ball. DeJuan Jones especially, he was a winger in college. Well, actually, both Brandon Bye and DeJuan Jones were wingers in college. But DeJuan Jones has really established himself as a very strong attacking fullback. I believe he had 5 assists in that chart you had a few slides ago. Chancalay and Barrero, they're both going to be very strong attacking wingers that can carry the ball through the midfield. I expect a lot of wing play. Under Bruce Arena, there were a lot of crosses between DeJuan Jones and Brandon Bye, essentially with 2 attacking wing backs, and then having Polster kind of drop and kind of fill the spaces when those 2 guys go up. Mark Anthony Kay, I don't know if Kay and Polster are going to play. Personally, I would like to see Noah Buck out there. Kind of playing as more of a box-to-box midfielder. He's obviously got a lot of hype and expectations around him. And I can also make the argument, too, you pointed out the midfield there, too. Ian Harkes had a phenomenal season for the Revolution, too. Last season when he came over midseason, not a lot of people expected a ton from him. So you have 4 really strong midfielders. They're probably going to mix and match throughout the season. There's really no wrong answer there, but they can go super defensive in the midfield with Kai and Polster, or they can put in Noel Buck, who is certainly a very creative passer and has improved year over year with the team. So, a lot of options there in the midfield too. That's where I'd go with. I think you're going to be seeing a lot of speed up the wings. And I don't know if we're going to see as much crossing as we did under Bruce Arena, but certainly expect to see a lot of wing play with Barrero and Jones and Chancalay and Bye working the ball up the field.
I really like this midfield. I think that's going to be one of the strengths of your team this year, and I specifically like Ian Harkes because in EA Sports FC you can buff the hell out of his card and get him to be like a 90 in the first couple of weeks. So I like that there. Let's talk about the real life now. You guys have a rookie kind of number 10 midfielder here. I'm not even going to attempt to say his name. He made his international debut with the U.S. men's national team just a few weeks ago. Can you talk about the Badra Terovic?
Yeah, we can just call him Esmir. I've been calling him Esmir for 2 or 3 years. I think that's easier. Why hurt yourself? trying real hard. I'm always impressed too when Apple TV commentators could just pull it off, easily. I've been working on it 2 years, but
it's almost like they're paid to do that. Isn't that strange how that works out?
Yeah.
They practice it ahead of time. I like Esmir. I think Esmir. It's like Cher, you know what I mean, or Prince, like Esmir. We can just call him by one name, but he's a phenomenal player. I talked about Noel Buck a minute ago, and he's been getting some looks with the England U20s. A lot of people have higher hopes for Esmir than they do Noel Buck. He hasn't really gotten a ton of minutes with the first team, and he's kind of blocked. You have him behind Carlos Hill there. He's made some appearances with the first team on the wing a little bit, but he really should be a 10. He had a phenomenal season with Revs 2 last year, 8 goals, a great, impressive camp with the United States this past January. So
I think he was the best player on the field in that match that he played.
A lot of people were saying that too. I mean, he's a standout player with a very, very high ceiling, and the Revs aren't going to be his best team that he's ever going to play for. So I'll be interested to see how the team comes out early in the season with Dylan Barrero out. I personally think this is a good chance to get Esmir on the field as a winger, even though that's probably not his best spot. Carlos Hill roams around a lot anyway, and when he started Revolution, he actually started on the right wing, playing more on the right side. So I think there's some potential there where, if Carlos Hill moves out to the right wing, maybe Esmir can move into the center a little bit and they can shift around. But
a little 4-2-2-2 on.
Got some 4-2.
Dual tens. Let's go, baby.
There are a lot of options that they can roll with here. But I think the important thing is that this is his 3rd season with the first team. It's time to see what he has. And I think with Dylan Barrero out, there's actually a spot open for him. And hopefully it goes to him and not Nacho Gil or Ima Boateng, who are very respectable veterans. But we've seen them. We know what they are. We know their limitations. And I think this is going to be a big year for Esmir to take the next step.
Love it. Let's move into 2024, put our crystal ball on. What's the strengths of this team?
Strengths of this team, I would certainly say Carlos Hill, Dylan Barrero, Shankalai. I think there's going to be a lot of attacking firepower in the midfield. I also think the center back pairing of Dave Romney and Henry Kessler is very good. Dave Romney was, some people thought he should have gotten Defender of the Year consideration last year. Henry Kessler has been nagged by injuries, but still very young, still a very promising player. At his peak a few years ago, he was called into the Gold Cup roster for the United States men's national team. So I think Romney and Kessler are another strength that this team has. But I think ultimately, if the team can get enough production out of Giacomo Vrioni, they should be able to match their production back from 2021 when the team had Tejan Buchanan, Carlos Hill, Gustavo Bo, and Adam Buxa hitting on all cylinders. If Vrioni is able to be a double-digit goal producer, you're going to have 4 very, very strong attackers down the stretch of the season.
What are the weaknesses of the squad?
Well, that's a good question. I think I don't know if I would call it a weakness just yet, but I think Ravas has a lot to prove as the goalkeeper. Obviously, we've talked about Petrovic and Matt Turner, and the Revolution have been very, very beneficial from phenomenal goalkeeping. And a lot of times it's bailed out the defense. So I think that he's going to have some big shoes to fill, and it might be a weakness, but I think that's a little bit TBD. I think the other weakness too for this team is just kind of the locker room, the camaraderie. Is 2023 past them? Because there was a lot of distrust and a lot of tension in the locker room. And Omar Gonzalez, actually on his way out after the playoff game in Philadelphia, mentioned that he felt there was a lack of leadership in the organization. So I think if there's going to be a downfall for the Revs, it might not necessarily be on the field, because I think on paper this is a very solid team. But I think Caleb Porter has a bit of a disjointed locker room, and it'll be interesting to see if this team comes out and has some strong cohesion to start the year.
Great. We have some questions for you, just some 2024 storylines that we can follow throughout the year. My first one is, can Caleb Porter bring this team success?
Yeah, I absolutely do think there is a chance Caleb Porter brings success. I talked about this a little at the beginning, but he has the resume. He's a strong voice in the locker room, and I think that's what this team needs now. It's a very veteran team, so they know who Caleb Porter is. This isn't a team that needs a lot of raising and grooming of young players. This is a team that's kind of built to win now. So I think this is going to be a boom or bust team, and if everything goes right, if Caleb Porter pulls the right strings, this is going to be a top 4 team in the East.
Tell us, in your like in your heart, do you believe this? Does Vrioni have another level, or have we kind of seen what he is?
I think we've seen what he is. He's been here a year and a half. I can't tell you what Vrioni does incredibly. I think he's a average to above average player for MLS, but there's nothing that to me strikes me as an elite player. With Adam Buksa, you saw right away that he had incredible aerial ability. And that's one thing that Vrioni, by the way, doesn't really do very well. He's not great at heading the ball, which for a team that relied on a lot of crosses kind of made him not so impactful. But I don't think he's particularly that fast. I don't think his runs are particularly that good. There are sometimes he seems disjointed with the Revolution. There isn't really one or two particular skills that stands out to me as an elite striker. And so I know he's part of the model where the Revs bring in a designated player, and they buy for 3 or 4 million with the hopes of selling him for 7 or 10 million. I'm not sure we're going to get that out of Vrioni.
Yeah, my question kind of piggybacks on that. If we go 4-2-3-1, can we rely on Vrioni being the one? Is Wood stepping up? What is the split of play time going to be there?
Yeah, and it's the same thing as it was last year, too, where Vrioni was expected to be the guy throughout the season. It was going to be his first full season. And then very early in the regular season, Bobby Wood kind of took over that spot and got on a hot streak, 7 goals, 5 assists. I believe his minutes were around Vrioni, and I think by most metrics, he outperformed Vrioni between goal production, assist production, key passes, any stat you could look at per 90. He seemed to have outplayed Vrioni, or at least was comparable to him, which I don't think a lot of people were expecting. I think Bobby Wood was expected to be a backup. So I think Vrioni is going to be the guy, and they're going to give him a little bit of leash. But I wonder if this team struggles a little bit, and if Vrioni's goal is 3-4 games into the season, when do they turn to Bobby Wood? Because it seems like going into the year, it's going to be one of those two guys who is the one. And as I say, if they do not produce, I fully expect them to go out and try again in the summer window.
For sure. So, okay, there's a little bit of doubt over Vrioni, and there's a little bit of doubt over Wood. We know Wood's sort of like durability history there too. So who leads the team in goals? Is it Carlos Heel?
I'm going to go with Thomas Shankly, and this might be a bit of a small sample, but he scored 6 goals and was acquired, I believe, in August. Very electric player. Is a dangerous striker. He's got a very, very good knack for goal, and also he's able to create chances on his own. There have been a lot of times where he gets the ball in midfield and he's able to run up the field and take on 2 or 3 defenders at a time. And even if he doesn't score, he gets a good chance off. So I think Thomas Shankly is going to be the guy that Carlos Heel is going to be looking for. I think Dylan Barrero too, he's a bit of a dark horse. If he was playing a full season, he got off to a very, very hot start last year. And a lot of people thought last year was going to be his kind of coming out party. He was going to be an MLS potential all-star. Obviously, a torn ACL undid that. But if Barrero, I fully expect to get another 5 to 7 goals, even though he's going to have limited time. In terms of leading goals, I think it's going to be Thomas Shankly, and I think that's going to be. I think Carlos Heel too. He's the penalty kick taker too, so I think he's another dark horse to look out for. I believe he had 8 goals last year, but he's mostly a passer. I think he's going to be looking for Shankly a lot.
I love you're depending on a lot on the wing play. This is like Sporting Kansas City 2022 here. Love that. And we talked about development already, so I guess we can skip that. And I just want to throw over to you. Are there any storylines that we missed? If I turn on the game on a random, April afternoon, what should I be looking for?
Well, for a random April afternoon, I'll change the question because there are a lot of storylines. I think Carlos Heel, he's actually in his contract season. So I think that's something that not a lot of people are talking about. But, he's been the leader of this team. He's still an elite player. He's been with the Revs for half a decade. He's going to be playing under his 3rd coach with the Revolution. So how does that situation play out throughout the year? Do we get to midseason without a contract? And he's eligible for MLS free agency too. So I think if the Revs wait too long, they risk a very good chance of him leaving. And if the season is going kind of rocky, does he look elsewhere? Does he want out in the summer window? Does he want to know his next destination before the end of the year? So I think that might be something, a subplot that people should be aware of. Another subplot people should be aware of is Noel Buck. A lot of people believe he's back to Europe. Tom Bogart is no offer from at this stage. Summer window that will be. So I would take a look.
All right, Greg, we are losing audio on you there, so we're going to keep an eye on that midfield. I assume that's where you're going to go. We're talking about with Noel Buck, Ian Harkster's going to be see how they get some playing time, see how they develop throughout the season. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Designated Pundits. Same old podcast on the same old IED Sports Network. So thank you guys for being with us, and good luck this season. Let's run it back again and meet again real soon. This Revolution team is going to be, we talked about being hit or miss before, but that's the whole thing. Either you win the cup or you don't. Only one team hits a year, and with Caleb Porter, you have a window. Let's see what you can do in it. Thank you again, Greg, for joining us here on the Designated Pundits. Thank you at home for watching. Make sure you check in as we preview each and every one of the 29 Major League Soccer teams.